Good afternoon, everyone. We are excited to have this panel discussion today on women in climate resilient jobs towards a sustainable and gender just recovery. We will wait for a few more minutes and start at 2:35 as we wait for more participants to join. So please be here and be with us. We have a few guidelines to help us understand who's in the room. So appreciate if you could have a look at these and also update your name and organization details. Look forward. Okay, so I'll kickstart this panel discussion with a brief introduction of what we aim to do today. As we know that electric vehicles in India have grown at an annual rate of 40% since 2015 and are estimated around 500,000. Two-wheelers comprise about 97% of these. Additionally, there are around 1.5 million lead-acid battery-powered e-rickshaws. And the national government has introduced policy and programs to encourage the adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles, vehicle components, and batteries. Some of these schemes include the faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles, known as the FAME 1 and 2 schemes in 2015 and 19, respectively. The National Mission on Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage in 2019, the National Program on Advanced Chemistry Cell and Battery Storage 2021. As of 2021, at least 15 state governments have introduced electric vehicle policies or e-mobility policies. However, even with a low urban labor force participation rate of about 18% for women in 2019-20, we find a limited policy attention on how the disruption caused by the e-mobility industry can benefit women and girls, and how a level playing field can be created for their participation. And it's not as if education is, for example, a barrier. We are finding that higher education levels are also not translating into jobs for women. Women's education levels have been rising across the country, including in STEM courses, where women now constitute about 47% of incoming students. However, you find that the unemployment rate is highest amongst women with diplomas, those who are graduates, and women with postgraduate degrees and above. And it is lowest amongst non-literate women or those who may not have the resources perhaps for education as well. Women in the age group of 15 to 59 years constituted only 1.4% of the transport workforce in India in 2018 and 19, whereas they constitute close to 26% in the manufacturing sector. The transport sector has traditionally been considered as an industry that is not for women, and you find that only 0.27% of women workers, 0.27% of all women workers are in the industry, compared to the manufacturing sector, where we have 13% of all women workers. And so while this is on the mobility industry and the manufacturing sector, when we look at e-mobility from user perspective, we find that there is again little discussion on the gender implications of charging infrastructure and range anxiety, which are some of the top concerns regarding EV adoption amongst users. Women, for example, may fear charging their vehicles in deserted or dark areas of their city. For lower income women workers, there are regulatory and financial barriers to obtain licenses or become heavy commercial vehicle drivers or for asset ownership. But what is perhaps encouraging is that the e-mobility industry is in its nascent stage. And there is an opportunity to create gender inclusive policies, regulations, institutions, fiscal instruments, skilling and awareness programs to ensure a just and a post-pandemic recovery and transition. So the effort that we have in reducing our carbon emissions also achieve a just transition. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation with an esteemed panel of speakers today. And what is really exciting is that they come from different sectors. They come from renewable energy, agriculture, mobility, manufacturing, to discuss what this emerging industry can learn from them and what will it take to get us there. So without too much time, I would like to get our panelists on board. We have Divya Jain from UNDP India. We have Dolon Ganguly from Azad Foundation. We have Snigdha Verma from CESL. We have Saurav Roy from Tata Steel, and I think he also wears his dual hat as the co-chair of the Committee on CSR and Affirmative Action at CII. And we have Vivek Adiya from the Institute for Sustainable Communities. So we're very excited to have this panel join us. So I'll first start with Vivek. Is Vivek here on the screen?
Hi, Sonal.
Hi, nice. Okay, great. Very nice to see you here, Vivek. So, there you go. Now I see you. So Vivek, just, you have a background in supporting or providing guidance to industry and the corporate sector on climate mitigation. And, the discourse first starts with measurement, right? Through GHG inventories, understanding carbon emissions. But the language is too technical and is also gender neutral. What are the entry points for gender if we look at the corporate level?
Thank you so much. I think, Sonal, it's very exciting to be on this panel and really be amongst this esteemed group. Makes me a little bit nervous. We keep talking about just transitions, and you outline that, and how do we really look at climate change and its solutions, So I can probably start with that and then get into the manufacturing, the corporate side of it. We keep hearing all these different buzzwords all the time. That now is the time, now is the decade of action. If we can't get to that 1.5 degrees, can't reduce emissions, we won't be able to reverse global warming. But I strongly think we can solve climate change if we involve women. And the reason why this is because climate and inequality are some of the most pressing challenges that we face in our present times. And while everyone's been exposed to climate and the extreme weather events in a very similar manner, be it a large corporate, an MSME, a smallholder farmer, a woman entrepreneur somewhere, each one of them, as you all are aware, has different implications, and the way it affects and the way climate change manifests itself has different kind of implications. And most action plans and everything that we've seen from the last couple of years, including the COP26 at Glasgow, and the way large corporates have been taking up commitments, include recommendations to leave no one behind. And there are these big corporate commitments, big government commitments, and everyone talks about leaving no one behind. And the idea here is to talk about, okay, how can we negate any unintended consequences for the women, for underserved, for the minorities, when all these transitions towards low carbon economy happens, and when corporates move towards all of these aspects. And that's what makes me frustrated sometimes. That's what makes it challenging, because everyone looks at it as if it's a big problem statement and we need to do something about it and consider. Nobody looks at this as making women, making minorities, making the underserved as a part of the solution. Have been made by governments who are led by women. Heads of state have been women. They've got to net zero first. Some of the biggest corporates who've made these commitments have been led by women CEOs and women entrepreneurs. McKinsey, for example, talks about the world. We can add about $28 trillion to the global GDP, not too far along, but by 2025, if we involve women and achieve that gender parity, both on the economic and the environmental terms, as we move towards this net zero economy. So for me, it's not just a moral or a social issue about gender inclusion in business, gender inclusion in climate action, but it's more also of an economic one, and also for more of a solution-oriented one. And that's why I said at the start of my conversation that we can solve climate change if we involve. Type in your favorite as most influential women climate champion on the chat box sometimes, and it would be interesting to see the results. Now, why women can solve it, I can look at some examples and then we can revisit some of this better. Is because they have been there. Renewable energy is one of the most shining examples. Looking at securing their livelihoods, with their zeal and the entrepreneurial spirit that comes in. We've been working with a lot of women farmers in Central Asia. Shift towards organic, low carbon, zero input farming is being led by women who are also setting up enterprises on biomanure, biofertilizers and stuff. Corporates have been looking at very similar actions as well. They've been promoting, whether through their CSR or through various other initiatives, very much actions on that front. It's also happening in the informal space and also the social space. So tribal women in Udaipur, for example, again are becoming green entrepreneurs, trying to bring in the local artisanal skills. Barefoot College in Rajasthan, creating female solar engineers again. There are self-help groups who are mobilizing water, sanitation, large-scale programs. And this, is where that solutions lie. It's also very interesting to know, some large corporates have completely transitioned towards an all-woman driven enterprise. So just a few days back, Ultratech announced that it has, on the outskirts of Pune, set up its all-women-led cement manufacturing unit. Kirloskar has an all-women factory in Coimbatore. So all of these examples are just, coming up in such a big way and showcasing like women have very influential roles in purchasing decisions. They have very influential roles in supply chains and the contributions that make the global corporates earn their buck. And they are also the most vulnerable. So all in all, the decisions, the solutions, the engagement is only going to help us achieve our multiple goals of environment, climate, gender, social, economic growth, and a balanced kaleidoscopic recovery, if I may call it. So I'll pause here. Thanks again.
Yeah. Fascinating opening remarks, Vivek. This is lovely, and you're really prompting us to think about multiple things. One, and if I may rephrase your sentence a little bit, we can only solve climate change if we involve women, maybe. And you've given so many examples. So very, very, very good to pick up on them later. And I think it will be great to see, have those in the participants write the names of their women or gender minority climate champion in the box. I think it will be lovely to see who we can think of and maybe celebrate them as well. Talking about champions and talking about women breaking barriers, Dolon, the Azad Foundation has, for the transport sector, with its partner Sakha Cabs. Now, could you help us understand what has been Azad's experience in encouraging women in the e-mobility sector? What have been the experiences, the opportunities, and the challenges?
Thank you, Sonal, and thank you, Vivek, with this very encouraging and positive note. I mean, the beginning note. So yeah, Sonal, coming back to Azad, I think we need to. Now we are in a world we can't really talk without addressing the pandemic. So in Azad, particularly e-mobility sector, we have started working on. Honestly, we have been thinking and we have been trying to explore this e-mobility transportation even before pandemic. But seriously, when it we say that, we can say that the situation came like that after COVID, we had no option other than opting for e-mobility, because that's how the e-commerce industry was flourishing and women needed job. So giving little background of Azad has, I think many of you know, but for our viewers, Azad had started working from 2008. It started in Delhi, but right now we work in the 4 cities: Delhi, Jaipur, Kolkata, and Chennai directly, and with partners we work in four another cities: Bhubaneswar, Lucknow, Ahmedabad, and Indore. So Azad is present in 8 cities, and the Azad's core area is activities bringing women in non-traditional livelihood and provide them a livelihood with dignity. In of course, with our partner, when we say that provide them the job or livelihood with dignity, here the role of our strategic partner Sakha comes. So it's a hybrid model where Azad provides training to underprivileged women, particularly urban poor underprivileged women, and Sakha, our partner, sends them to the market for job. When we say non-traditional livelihood, what is the particular trade we are working with? we have been training women to be a professional drivers, because that's a totally unexplored profession for women when we started working. Now it's not unexplored, of course. Now it is common because we have been able to, I mean, you can see the cab drivers in the cities, and we can humbly say that many of them are trained by Azad. More than 3,000 plus women have been trained by Azad for the driving, and around 2,000 women out of them are working in many cities in India as drivers. So under these numbers and the context, our focus was the driving, train them in four-wheeler. And of course, in Delhi, we started the bus driving, training on bus driving also. The only woman bus driver of Delhi is trained by Azad. And soon, hopefully, you will see more bus drivers who will also trained by Azad and will be tested by Sakha in bus driving work. So under this context, when the COVID came, and even before COVID, we were thinking of launching e-cabs. That has been, we are talking about, we have already launched not the cab, but the training car in Jaipur, the 3 electric car we have been started. The women have started getting training in the e-cabs. E-buses also, we are talking to the Delhi government that when they are launching e-buses so hugely, then women should get opportunity or the reservation for the job of the drivers for the e-buses. But in particular, I would talk about the e-bikes, because after pandemic, it came to surface that women, I mean, men too, our families are jobless. They are huge debt because many days they didn't have job. Women in particular are subjected to severe domestic violence, because earlier when the situation was normal, pre-pandemic days, the perpetrator men used to go to job and they used to come back at night, and women had strategies to save them in the night from the men who were the perpetrator of domestic violence. But during lockdown and the job losses, men are whole day at home, and with that the violence has increased. And that is the NCW data says that in India 5 times domestic violence have been increased during after COVID. At the same time, the huge pressure of unpaid care. So that's the context I would not say after the sudden attack, because we are not yet post-pandemic zone, unfortunately. But after this sudden attack of pandemic, that's the situation, that's the reality of the women, particularly underprivileged women of our urban poor section, they are facing. So one is no job, no livelihood, staying with the violence perpetrator whole day and night, and hugely increased unpaid care work and debt. So when gradually this lockdown started, lockdown lifted. So then women start, the trainees, the women who were in Azad system already, during lockdown, we had to stop the training in that way, but we did some other kind of work with them, but I'm not going into that. But soon, when gradually that lockdown has started lifting in many cities, then we were thinking that what kind of, because the car job, cab job, or private placement in the professional four-wheeler driving sector was also in a soup, honestly, because people were not going out, they didn't need the driver. For the cabs also, not very, people were not going out, so they didn't used to hire cab in that way. And also generally people's income has been decreased, so they are just cutting their regular expense of that keeping driver or hiring cab. So under this situation, when we were exploring that what could be done, then we have realized that e-commerce industry, with its own set of limitations, of course, it is flourishing, it is opening for women, and they are interested to appoint women in the delivery executive job. Then we started that training on the two-wheelers. And when we started this new venture, after, I think from August 2020, after the first phase lockdown and all, Then we decided that it should be the environment friendly. This is the time we have to, this is the topmost priority of the world, that climate should be just sustainable, and that's how our planet should be sustainable actually. So in that way, we introduced e-bike during our training, and also when they started going to job in this e-commerce companies, the food sector, the delivery sector, and we started providing them e-bikes. And also some companies provided them e-bikes, initially for free, but later they have started the renting system, which is fairly good. Yeah, Sonal, I have 2 minutes. So just quickly, right now I can say that around 80 women have been employed in this delivery sector, as delivery executives with e-bikes. There are a lot of challenges, but I need 1 minute. 2 minutes is not enough for describing challenges. But quickly, Sonal, one is the huge thing is no charging station in many cities. So when women are out, the infrastructure is a huge issue. So state, while we are thankful the states who are, and as you said, that 15 states in India are talking about the e-transportation, which is hugely commendable. At the same time, the infrastructural support like charging station, even in the industries where these workstations they have to go and to pick up the delivery things and all, there are also charging stations are needed. So for charging stations, government and industry should work together. There are huge issue of the washroom for women when they go out for work. That's hugely required. And one important thing is that it is, we always see the and the end product we want to see. But if we just go to little back to reach women, the state and the industry and civil society organizations together, all of us should have an all-encompassing policy to reach them, to reach the real, as Vivek said. And when we say women are not homogeneous. We must keep in mind, women do have other identities, caste vulnerability, religion vulnerability, disability, gender and sexual identities, and challenges related to that. So we need to reach the women who are really needed, who are really marginalized. So there should be some policy how we can reach them, how we can share information with them, number one. Number two, then training. So Azad is only one organization, and there will be 4-5 organizations in India who are working on this. But the state need to hugely invest on training if really we want to bring women in this new sector, e-transportation. And when we say training, if I get chance later, I will explain what we mean by training. But this is not just technical training, because traditionally women were told that you are not fit for this job. So they need technical training. At the same time, they need the training on confidence building, training on the life skills, spoken English, self-defense, and many things. We do have Azad have a huge, this all comprehensive modules. We can share it later if we get chance. But the point is investment in training, infrastructure, and the what we are facing challenge that women are joining, but retention is a huge problem because workspaces are not yet gender inclusive in terms of the washroom, the sexual harassment policy, violence-free workforce. And I have just one particular thing. I'll finish here. I'll stop here for this round. That I think in the workplace, industries should think of training men also, men co-workers, that because for them also, that women co-workers with the bike and taking the huge this luggage and delivering is new experience. So sometimes they become patronizing, or sometimes they become little unfriendly. So I would say that men co-workers need training to how to provide space and for women in this particular e-mobility sector. I'd stop here with this, Sonal, and well, I think I'll
So
get chance.
much. Absolutely. Thank you, Dolon, for providing us a background of Azad's work. as well as kind of reminding us a little bit about the looming COVID-19 pandemic and its after effects, and what it may mean for resource poor women to actually enter the e-commerce sector also. And I think what is also really interesting is that while we talk about opportunity, I think what you're reminding us is that have existing workplace policies and infrastructure changed as well? And maybe that will also need to happen in order to leverage this opportunity or this transition. So with this, I will go to you, Snigdha. CESL, which is the Convergence Efficiency Services Limited, is a public sector unit and part of the Energy Efficiency Services Limited. And today, CESL is aggregating demand for electric vehicles. We have two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and buses. And I think you're doing this to negotiate, I would think, better terms, as well as send signals to the original equipment manufacturers in investing and innovating in EV technology as well. Could you talk about how CESL is working towards increasing women and gender minorities representation in this sector?
Right, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Sonal, and thanks for capturing a lot of our work. I do want to emphasize again that we were, as you brought up at the start of the panel discussion, that with the FAME scheme coming up, we were appointed as the nodal agency for implementation of demand, for aggregating demand for 3 lakh electric three-wheelers and for electric buses in the 9 largest cities in the country. So we've been working on that for the past year, and you did bring up the issues around what are the bottlenecks or what are the points that are specifically significant for women. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the policy interventions that we are doing, and then a little bit about the access to finance, and then a little bit about the awareness and training activities that we are doing. And then I'll share a few anecdotes as well. So the policy interventions we're doing is one, I'll talk about the EV policy with Delhi that we are working on, where we have categorically emphasized that there should be at least a third of the auto users should be women. So that sort of creates an immediate opportunity for women to reach out and sort of get licenses, and the Delhi government has done a great job of reaching out and issuing licenses to women. So that's sort of the way that the ecosystem is being built up and being made to be inclusive. Similarly, for women, for including women in buses, what we've done is that we issued a pan-India tender for 5,000 plus electric buses, and we categorically said in that tender that 10% of the drivers in these buses should be women. So that sort of, again, sort of helps create the pipeline. And then I know Azad is doing a great job and sort of working on the various aspects around that. So these sort of partnerships go a long way. I'll also talk about access to finance, and you've shared previously as well about the challenge where women often are not the owners of the vehicles and are often not the financial decision makers, and that sort of limits their ability to find placement in places like in owning an auto or owning a cab for some of the user-based service companies we have right now. And what we are trying to do is we are exploring the possibility of creating a micro mobility fund where we are partnering with NBFCs and creating a pool of funds which can be partially guaranteed through our government intervention, and then as a way sort of bring down the financing cost, which we currently estimate through our market understanding is about 24 to 36% for purchasing an auto. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to pool the demand and then bring in the NBFCs and see if we can partially guarantee the return on investment and bring it down. So that's one big aspect that we are working on towards the access to finance for women and for groups that require this sort of support. In terms of awareness and training, government is already doing a lot of work on creating awareness around electric mobility. Bureau of Energy Efficiency is doing a lot of work around that. And we're sort of putting our efforts towards that as well. For example, for electric three-wheelers, we're going down to markets, to communities where there would be more takers for these vehicles. So we're going and creating awareness campaigns, very localized, community-centric awareness campaigns that we are doing. It's called Go Electric. So we're doing that. We're supporting that. And we also have a partnership going on with Azad, which also we're hoping will help us reach more people in the community, make them aware of electric vehicles. So we're doing these sort of things. We're partnering with Kinetic Green, for example, that's headed again by a female entrepreneur. So that sort of connects the dots and helps push the agenda for women. I should also mention that my MD is also a woman, which helps put the case forward. And I thought I'll just end with a little anecdote. A couple of days ago, somebody called me and asked me, so we're trying to reach out to some women who will be willing to buy electric autos with our financing scheme that we're offering. And a very interesting question that came up was that this lady is a license holder, but she intends for her husband to use the auto. But this auto is going to be lilac because that's the policy. So the question was, if a male person is seen on the road driving a lilac auto, will that be a problem? So I don't think we have a rule against it, but I think these are some things that will come up. So yeah, so it's interesting and sort of steps towards a long journey.
Sure. Thank you so much for highlighting the multiple things that you are doing, both through your, through your procurement power, if I may. And interestingly, we are seeing multiple cities using, I guess, they're using particularly electric three-wheelers and having women operate them. I don't know if they are on a lease agreement with CESL, but we're certainly seeing this in Jaipur. We're seeing this, I believe, in Pune, some initiatives in Guntur as well. So perhaps, initiatives are starting on a small scale, but we may also have to see how it scales up. Coming to you, Divya, the UNDP India has been working on mainstreaming gender in peri-urban and rural livelihoods in India. And can you help us understand how you have done this and what has been your learnings over here?
Thank you so much, Sonal, first of all, and thanks a lot to all the panelists. I think some very important points have been made also with specific examples and strategies which really help us to also translate and contextualize these different policies which we have been talking about. So I will like to tweak my response a little bit and talk about things which have not been touched so that it's kind of beneficial for everyone. I'll take a step back and talk about gender mainstreaming in general within the livelihood enhancement and employment space, and in last 5 to 7 years, what has UNDP also has attempted to do. I think we as an organization has been working extensively on the whole agenda of gender mainstreaming, and also particularly focusing on women, with both equipping them with digital capacities, financial capacity, but as well as psychosocial support, which has been very, very important, whether it is rural area or urban area or peri-urban. And it has definitely shown a lot of success across age groups and education background also. And as I think Dormin has very rightly mentioned, and that gender is not a binary category. There is a lot happening in terms of identity politics also, which we really, really need to also look at as private sector, NGOs, government sort of come together. Coming back to what we have tried to do is we've been working with women, particularly linking them to employment, both at a very hyper-local level also, but with bigger companies and entrepreneurship opportunities in these areas. We believe that these programs need to be designed in a holistic manner where we focus on capacity building that helps women in removing key social economic barriers, also helps them step out of their homes and become more confident. And really one of the key learning outcome is that they have to become, they're encouraged to become financially independent. In our current intervention, we work very closely with education institutions like colleges, ITIs, community-based organizations, primarily village council bodies and self-help groups, and train women and girls in soft skills through village level centers as well, where we are working with college and school dropouts girls also. We also conduct a series of entrepreneurship training where we support women in setting up businesses. And we even give them advisories on what kind of enterprises they can set up. Now we work using, we do this entire thing through using a community cadre approach, where we are identifying business mentors in the same community and vicinity, so that they can on a regular basis do handholding and support for these women entrepreneurs through business management trainings. Most of our trainers and mobilizers also remain women. It is really helping on the ground, creating an ecosystem, an alliance, and an atmosphere where women are encouraged to move, support each other, and access information in a more systematic way. And while this approach has been working for us, we've been constantly realizing that we need to do more, and particularly in the non-traditional jobs. But there's one point that I really want to make here, that while we are moving towards non-traditional livelihoods, and it's very forward-looking approach across government and private sector, and Sridhar gave some brilliant examples. We also need to remind ourselves that gender inequality has been a big challenge in traditional livelihoods also. It's not been easy for women farmers, women entrepreneurs, or women running a kirana store in a rural area to actually have the same wage. There's so many women in the handloom industry or in the farming industry where women either don't get paid anything when they're contributing to the GDP, or they get really low paid, or they're still within the supply chain also. They end up doing the job roles which by definition are low paid, or vice versa. So I think the same kind of social economic barriers will get translated to automobile sector also, if we do not watch out for these kind of bottlenecks, and what is really encouraging or is a hurdle when women and girls enter these kind of non-traditional livelihood. We will really see a mirror image if we don't focus on parallelly breaking and creating systems which can help women and girls more. So just wanted to highlight that one point. We also need to work on building, women's digital capabilities, as I spoke about, and also make, more climate resilient jobs, whether it is around smart agriculture, whether it is about creating, involving women into recycling plastic, or EV mobility sector itself. So, for example, in Delhi, in our model in Delhi, we have come up with 4 job roles: EV assembly line operator, auto service technician, sales executive, and warehouse associate. Now, central government is going to come up with battery guidelines also. And we are really closely looking at that, where we can design and define more such job roles for women, tie up with local institutions, so district skill committee, MSMEs, apprenticeship. These become again very important institutions at the ground level, through where we can actually design policy agendas, and these are the most approachable and close to local youth. These entities also need to have better recruitment and training facilities for it to be more women friendly and safe. And this is safety, mobility, better, law enforcement are going to be very critical to our success within the EV sector as well. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Sure, a lot of good points. And I think one of the key takeaways, I think for me is that on one hand, while we may have targets, on the other hand, you have emphasized the need to create an ecosystem where women from different backgrounds are both aware of, are skilled, and can take advantage of these jobs. So it looks like if the demand is created, how do you match, quote unquote, the supply as well to create good and fair jobs? So we'll come back to this because lots of good points here. because we're talking a lot about the private sector today, and it's a good time for me to talk to you, Saurabh. I think you're wearing dual hat today, both in your capacity in leading corporate social responsibility at Tata Steel, as well as being the chairperson of the Committee on CSR and Affirmative Action for CII. Would you help us understand from either one of these in terms of what is happening around affirmative action? What does it mean and entail?
Sonal, good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and I completely echo Vivek in his nervousness in being a panel like this one. Right. So let's. I think everyone here has actually very articulately set out the fact that there is a problem. There is a problem of underrepresentation. There is a problem of not enough work being done on the cross section or intersection of gender and climate change or climate response. So, which is compounded further by the fact that gender is, again, I think Dolan was making that point she sort of touched on that point, but women and what they could possibly mean to the development agenda cannot just be seen in isolation of other sociological, anthropological reasons. It's a complicated subject. Having said that, I think when we started, let me sort of wear both my foundation hat as well as my sort of private sector hat, as you put it, right? So when we started looking at our our work a few years ago and sort of set out let's say a vision or a purpose for whatever is being done, I think we in our vision statement for the Tata Steel Foundation, we've set out nice ambitious phrases like enlightened, equitable society, but we took a call and said that we are going to say, so the vision that we set out was enlightened, equitable society where every individual realizes her potential with dignity. Right. So when we set that out, I mean, the number of people who thought that it was a typo and the her was a typo, and the number of people who suggested, why don't you make it there, instead of sort of taking that call was alarming actually. Right. But we said, listen, I mean, that it's we need to take a few bold calls, and then that's where this entire narrative is to move. Interestingly, we before the first wave of the pandemic, we had reached out to about 6,500 people in deep rural areas across the country where our work sort of reaches directly or indirectly, and asked them a simple question, saying that, what does the next decade look like for you? Because when we were trying to, build our own narrative for the next 10 years, we could find a lot of secondary opinion, but there was very limited direct engagement with communities. So, when we started looking at the response, it's one question only and a simple answer to that. When we started looking at, sorting through to find what the mega trends were, find what the responses were, we realized about 43%, let's say 45% of the total respondents had actually mentioned climate or directly or indirectly in their worldview of the next 10 years, right? Which is, a plus one for all of us who are saying that climate change has not come out of conference rooms and, is actually out in the field. When we looked at only about 3,200 women in this set who had mentioned this number went up to about 78%. So that's more than 3 out of 4 women directly or indirectly mention climate or its impacts in their worldview of the next decade. So not only are they underrepresented, but at least based on this primary information that we have, it is also more top of mind for women than men, right? And that is usual, right? I mean, women tend to be more forward-looking, more this thing, and there's enough theory around that. So I think in this space also, that's what we at least found. Having with that, I think there are 3 buckets in which I would just like to quickly allude to some of the thinking that we've had, a lot of say experiments or early stage thinking around this. So the Tata Group has and also the CII sort of grappling with it also to set out an agenda on this. The affirmative action agenda this used to be a Dalit and Adivasi agenda till shortly. I mean, till a few years ago. The definition has expanded to now also include gender. That's the first step. So this is possibly the most structured program in India incorporated on an affirmative action piece. And one of the pillars that we've taken up, and I'm just coming fresh off an assessment for Tata Motors, for instance, right, is when we are talking of sustainable mobility, how do you also get the social mobility angle in, in defining what sustainable mobility is, particularly for players who have disproportionate market shares across the various components of e-mobility. So a few efforts, and I particularly like to call out Tata Motors and a few of our automobile supply chain vendors in CII, in the CII piece, where much like the work that Azad Foundation does, I think there's a lot of emphasis on, first of all, identifying jobs, both which are at threat, because as we move away towards, say, business models with lesser carbon footprint, and we found that the jobs that are at threat have an overrepresentation of women in the workforce, right? So how do you correct that? And therefore, when the newer jobs or newer job roles or newer supply chain opportunities that are coming up, how does one take some of those calls and make a business sense out of a gender or a sociological angle in these investments? So that's a new piece that is now being templatized and formatted and put into assessment criteria for companies, right? So that is one push that we are trying to make. Then actually, on solar capacities, on battery making capacities, on charging capacities, a lot of the Tata value chain companies are actually now, exactly, I think one of my co-panelists made that point, are transitioning to gender predominant working models. Because for us, I think that's the imbalance that we need to look at. The vocations or the jobs that are most under threat or most at risk have an overrepresentation of women. So therefore, the ones that are coming up new needs to have a disproportionately higher representation of women. So that's the balance that we are trying to achieve, if I may. So that's the affirmative action part of what I'm saying. Also, there are several new business models that are coming up, courtesy the environment or the sustainability or the carbon or the water narrative. I think it's important for all of us to understand that these are opportunities. If you look at business as a whole, if you look at industry as a whole, labor intensity is going to go down, whereas education levels, across society, education levels, vocation levels are actually probably static or not, growing up at that level. So there's going to be how does one put it, a slightly unrealistic reliance on merit, which is going to come in, whereas the path to merit is becoming difficult, but the dependence on this word merit, without understanding the sociological, anthropological, the gender nuances of merit, is becoming much more predominant in businesses, right? So the idea is, if you look at newer models that are going to come up, how can we design these models right from scratch, right from the start, to be more representative in their construct? So I have 3 examples which we are working on, which I just wanted to share with very early stage initiatives. But if I may say so, we are slightly obsessing about this. So one is, I think there's a transition to, let's say, a hydrogen fuel economy, okay, for a lot of industrial setups. Now, hydrogen by definition will rely on a biomass-based value chain, right? And a biomass-based value chain will be an offshoot of agri-value chains, right? If we understand this simple link, and what we've done is we are currently working with about 1,500 women farmers, women-headed households who are actually looking at creating a biomass-based value chain, which feeds into an eventual hydrogen-based industrial economy, right? So these are smallish experiments which will eventually feed into, if hydrogen is the future, then let's experiment with hydrogen. Let's see how gender representation comes around there. This entire emphasis on alternative materials. There was a time when aluminum was looked at as an alternative material. Now things like graphene is looked at as an alternate material to, say, steel and also some other base metals. Now graphene is critically dependent on lac. Okay, and lac, India, parts of Jharkhand, parts of Odisha, parts of Bengal are the largest producers of lac in the world, right? And lac is best produced in rural value chains, right? So there's actually a very organic connect. Again, I think we're working with about 2,500 farmers, about 700 women-led households in creating lac value chains, which will eventually feed into an alternative material narrative. The circularity narrative, I think this is a slightly easier one, where a lot of upcycling businesses are now coming up, which are actually, which is a model which many people are grappling with. One of the things that we are trying to do is to look at in urban agglomerations like Jamshedpur, some parts of Bhubaneswar, some parts of Chaibasa, the smaller agglomeration, where you're taking residential waste gases, and processing these gases, primarily methane and these gases, to actually set up food entrepreneurs, who are using these waste gases. So sort of, and most of these are actually, I think currently there's a small experiment that we're doing. We have about 15 women-led businesses which are dependent on these waste gas-based units. Right. So these are, again, I mean, as these models explore right from the drawing board, it's important to you can't think of the model, and that mistake has been made in the previous round of industrialization. You can't think of the model and then think, oh my God, how can I get more? How can we make this more equitable? You have to think of equity at the drawing board stage. So that's, these are a few experiments that we are doing. Happy to share more if there's interest. And finally, the biggest thing is, see, the climate narrative has now come out of the conference rooms, and inequity was always there outside. Dunia aisi thi, dunia aisi hai. Okay, that's how it is. First is, I think we've just embarked on an experiment where, again, link it back to the COVID piece. We have a 10-year-old program in the Darussalam Foundation called Mansi, which works on maternal and neonatal mortality, and works very closely with ASHA workers, okay, and A&M workers. Challenges of access, challenges of travel, danger, the threats, Sonal, that you were speaking about in the beginning of this piece are paramount. We've just started an experiment where in 3 districts in Jharkhand, we have actually we partnered with a few banks who are helping us with this. We are actually giving electric scooters to all Sahiya Sathis in 3 districts of Jharkhand. We just started out last week. We are setting up charging stations, small charging points to help them overcome. These are, we've been training them for the last 2 months now. The idea is, how do you sort of, expand the reach and lead to better health outcomes? But more importantly, I think the kind of dignity and the kind of this thing that it lends to this entire narrative of intersection of gender and electronic mobility, where a frontline health worker, Asha Didi, very proudly she rides an electric scooter, to work and back. I think we are seeing some amazing results on how it's coming out. I think in about 6 or 7 months' time, we should be able to do a paper along with some anecdotal evidence on how this is working. So that's one. That's, I mean, the e-mobility and the grassroots health narrative. We have a program where we are working in about 5,600 government schools with about 1.25 million children. About 3 years ago, we introduced a program where we are getting teachers, 95% of whom are women, to actually use local material to develop a climate understanding amongst children in remote tribal locations. So the TLM development, the way it has happened, and you can't wait for a chemistry labs to come up in a remote government school to actually start teaching chemistry to students. It's the same thing you can't wait for a certain level of infrastructure to come up before getting students to learn about or sort of take the climate narrative. And I think it's just magical how women are raising their hands as teachers and saying that we will take this agenda forward, to the extent that in about 1,100 schools, the teachers have moved and introduced a climate period, so to say, in the sense that taken out half an hour at the end of the day in 2 days, and that entire initiative was driven by SMC members and teachers who are women. So the magic that women can yield when they sort of, take up an agenda, like everything else in development, it's there in the climate narrative also. And finally, we're working, we've started working on a Disha program, which is a women leadership program. This is currently working with about 650 women. Two decisions that we took, which seem to be working well. One is to keep economic empowerment out of the picture over here. That is incidental. So there's a social empowerment module, there's a political empowerment module, there's a digital empowerment module, but we also introduced a climate empowerment module in this. Earlier it wasn't pulled out as a separate module, but to loop back to what I was saying earlier, we had these three modules: social empowerment, political empowerment, and digital empowerment. When we started talking about climate, the resounding feedback that we got was, please take this out as a separate module and let's go deeper into this. So about 5 months ago, we were compelled by these wonderful women who were working with to actually take this out, go deeper into their design, and start talking more and more. So the humble point that I'm making is, I think this intersection that we are talking about today is an important intersection. Lots of ideas that I have, that can actually see the light of day. And I think now is the time, maybe for the next 2 years, is the time when a lot of the ideas are at the drawing board stage. And I think if we lose the window in the next 2 years, then I think it's back to a bit of an uphill battle. So, but that's where I'll stop. And again, thank you for having me today.
Sure. Thank you so much, Saurav, for emphasizing the point of thinking about gender at the drawing board stage, right? So don't think of a program and say, all right, now how do we retrofit, but start conceptualizing. And a very good example, if you will, of thinking about the value chain of hydrogen fuel. I do have questions which were related to which sectors that you analyzed had that were under threat, had a higher representation of women. But before I do that, I would also like to take an opportunity for questions from the audience, because we have seen a few questions. So let me just take that opportunity. And so I think we have one question, because both Dolon spoke about charging infrastructure, right, and the lack or the unavailability of charging infrastructure. And we also have one of our participants who's from Jaipur, who is talking about the challenges of charging electric vehicles. So, and that the government needs to come up with charging systems to encourage buying of electric vehicles. So I would just like to see if Snigdha, would you want to kind of take this up so that maybe create a little bit of awareness around what the government is doing around charging infrastructure, so that might also help.
Right. No, those are valid points, in fact, that have come up. And I see Srinivas has also brought up a point on access to finance. So this is something that we are working on. And in fact, we are at very advanced stages currently in launching a program to launching a partnership for a pan-India partnership with CPOs, with the charge point operators, in about 1,800 locations, of which I think in the first phase it would be about 350 locations we'll start with. So that's coming up. Delhi also has done a very good job about launching land parcels for 500 locations. So these initiatives are coming out from the government side, and I'll share that the challenge, there is an understandable challenge on this side, because it's something that will not be a very strong revenue earning model for some time to come, for another couple of years to come. So we need a business model that and adequate financial support to be able to be able to focus on this. And that's something that I know that a number of entities are working on, and that's sort of where we are. And we do have, the Department for Heavy Industries has offered subsidies up to 50% for charge installation on highways and expressways. So all of that is something that's being worked on. And from CSL side, I can share that in the next few weeks, where there will be announcements for land parts. So we've aggregated land parcels through different government agencies, because that's sort of a key aspect on where to place the chargers, and that should be coming out. But this is an evolving sector, and charging infrastructure, the challenge happens to be that the government needs to sort of lead the way, and we need strong business models, and that's where we are.
Okay. Just want to also maybe address the second question, and this is also open to multiple panelists on the issue and the experience of financing, access to finances, and the ownership, asset ownership. Anyone would kind of like to respond to this question? Financing, like we said, of vehicles is the big elephant in the room. So any thoughts on that, and maybe kind of come at the learnings from other sectors for the e-mobility sector, if at all, if that helps? Yeah, please, Dolon.
Yeah, so thank you for touching these points, Digdha, and raising these, Srinivas, my colleague, in the chat box. I saw that. So yeah, I mean, financing has been, we have thought of some solutions. We can put it on the table, but just let me explain a little bit about what is going on ground. So I'm just giving our experience. When we started first this e-bike and this sending women with e-bikes in this e-commerce industries, what first came that where should we get the vehicle? And we had, at that point of time, I'm saying that it around August, September 2020, and it happened to all cities, almost all cities, I would say, but it started with Kolkata. We approached to all banks. We approached to all NBFCs, whoever present in Kolkata. None of bank or NBFC or financial institution provided any loan to the women. One bank actually had first of all, I mean, all the banks said that we don't provide any loan in e-vehicle. Number one. Number two, one bank said that yes, we can provide, but when the process started, the women come from underprivileged background, and for this loan or this checking that is there any collateral? First question there is. So these women don't have any collateral. When they go to check their household, they see there's a mud house. That's not a pakka structure of houses. So how can you ensure finance if the financial sector doesn't have a different look, different thought, different insight to include these women in the e-mobility sector? Here, and actually we couldn't organize a single loan from any one bank or NBFC in Kolkata and other cities too. So under this situation, the point I raised in many, we always from Azad, we raised it in many other forums also. There need, I mean, when we say that, yeah, it's a good thing that state is thinking of bringing women in e-transport, industries are thinking and opening it's appreciable job, but at the same time, there should be a multi-sectoral approach, because number one is investment in training. Number two is opening job opportunity, opening market. Number three, to help them financially to acquire the resource, the vehicle. Otherwise, how can they will join the job? Initially, some companies were providing scooties, very, very rare case, but a few companies provided e-scooties to the women to bring them, to include them in this delivery executive's job. But later, I understand completely they can't give it in free. So they are putting the rent on that. So the rent is around 4,000 and their income is around monthly 10, 12,000, 13,000. So in hand is actually less than 8,000. So how can we expect women will join somewhere where you don't give any subsidy or financial support to access the vehicle? So there should be, while I understand the energy sector is thinking of bringing women to save environment and all, but there should be a close coordination between the financial sector and other stakeholders like energy sector and other whoever and the industry, that there should be a close coordination to experiment this, to start this work, if we really want to make women, bring women in this industry of this.
Sure. And I think that we are also seeing perhaps some small scale initiatives like in Delhi as well, where we have the Seva Cooperative Bank provide loans to its members and also provide a lot of institutional support simultaneously. So maybe we can also look at models where we have women-oriented financial institutions who can help with the entire process, licensing, access to loans, etc. as well. Coming back to you, Vivek, first, and then other panelists, is learnings from other industries for the e-mobility sector. Vivek, you spoke about, and you gave us multiple examples from the Kirloskars and maybe from your own experience in perhaps in the textile manufacturing sector. Are there any learnings for the e-mobility sector? What can be done? Would really love to hear from you.
Perfect. No, thank you, Sonal. And I think there are tremendous learnings from various sectors, and I pick up from our financing conversation and also from the points that Saurabh was making about the drawing board conversation. So there are these disparities that exist, and the systemic challenges prevent the real uptake of anything. And when we spoke about financing, only 7% of women are actually having paid jobs in our country. Imagine that. And while one of our southern states of Tamil Nadu, highest employers of women in the manufacturing sector, 70% of women work in the fireworks, textiles, automotive industry, are paid half the wages than their male counterparts and stuff. Or imagine the workforce from the farm side of it, where about 65% of women in the workforce are on the agriculture side. They are doing the bulk of the work, right from growing and to the manual labor that's been put out. But none of them have lands to their names or any of those things which they are able to take any of those schemes there. And on the anecdote, again, what Snigdha provided, there could be various leakages that might come in. So even if you have schemes designed for women, loans designed for women, probably their husband would want to operate it and learn it and take advantage of all of it. So there is so much that needs to be done. And the starting point of our work and what we've realized is it just comes in with making sure there is a nice social behavioral work which has been going on. And Sunil, you've done most of that work in terms of how safe it is to travel, access, be there, what are the kind of enabling environments that are needed. So you start with that, then you look at the training and capacity, skilling purposes, across dimensions. And Dolan, to your opening remarks there, it covers a host of technical, life skills, business skills, all of it combined. So we work with about 300,000 farmers in central India. Most of them are women farmers, smallholder farmers, and they've started doing their entrepreneurship models on biofertilizers and biopesticides. But what they had been doing is they had been just selling it on bulk basis and not getting a price for their product and produce, and they were putting in so much of effort and stuff. All that was needed was kind of a business plan led intervention where they were starting to now package their manure in say 40 kg bags. They were able to brand it, something like an Amul, where you are able to bring in cooperatives and bring in those kind of dynamics, and suddenly their earnings shot up by 3 times, and they were able to sustain and survive in those cases. I was talking about those self-help group-led initiatives, which were out there. So 60 women from tribal locations in Rajasthan were trained. About 200, they in turn trained 200 people, and these 200 people could actually manufacture 60,000 solar lamps in less than 3 months, and then actually sell it out. So these are people who have never gone to school, never seen any of the books, never understand or held any equipment, and it was fascinating to see them, do the shouldering and do the assembly and stuff. So those skills are again, which are very important in that space, and then it just brings in and boosts those confidence areas. And then when you move beyond, are those policy mechanisms or those wider mechanisms that we see. So for example, we have a contrast of working with the apparel manufacturing MSMEs. One is in Tirupur, which is our largest knitwear exports capital, and then you have Surat, which is an equally large textile or an apparel manufacturing space. Tirupur has 92% of women in its workforce, and Surat has less than 12%. Imagine the contrast. Now, how do you really explain all of this? Is the fundamentals that have gone behind in terms of how better, how efficient is the process, how friendly it is, and stuff. So and these are the transitions that are happening. So when you have in Surat a lot of coal-fired, oil-fired boilers. How do you actually imagine, bringing more equal opportunities for people in the workforce? The moment you move towards those clean energy transitions, have solar rooftops, electric fired boilers, suddenly it's easier to do those calculations, press a button rather than shoving, tons and tons of coal into an equipment and then, not being able to work things out. So these transitions are happening. And when we talk about, the climate space, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's renewables, there were about 1.2 million people dependent on India's coal sector. And, so then you map out the percentage of women in our energy sector or energy space, and that coal sector played a big part out of that space. Suddenly you see renewables becoming 40% of our overall installed capacity, and there is a better balance in terms of the percentage of women in our energy sector now with that higher penetration of renewables and stuff. So these are the transitions on the energy side where we've seen from a very minuscule representation of women in the workforce, you suddenly have now a big chunk just because the technologies, the efforts, things have changed. And this is that drawing board conversation, which sort of was talking about. And on the mobility side itself, core mobility, employment or again, skills or livelihood dependencies. Just before COVID, the conventional auto sector was losing jobs left, right, and center. 250,000 jobs were lost. And at the same time, 11 states came in at that point of time, set up their own EV policies, and created an opportunity for 300,000 jobs to be rolled out in the EV sector. Now, what this means is the automotive sector are no longer hiring as many mechanical or automotive engineers, but they're hiring more electronics and electrical engineers and stuff. So people, the traditional mechanical or automotive ones, they don't know what to do and how do you reskill them. But at the same time, with this EV transition, there is so much equity coming in terms of opportunities for people from all diverse strata, including women, to find that feet in the workforce. So that's the transition where we should be looking at, starting from that, understanding the social dynamics, looking at the skilling gap, and then building it across, and then looking at the enabling policy environment, and then really lapping up the design stage right now to make sure we do it right in the first place and not have a disparity for Tirupur or a Surat for that matter. So.
Sure, and it's very interesting that you when you pointed this data from Tirupur and Surat, I was actually very surprised. And so is there, just if I may have a very quick follow-up question, is that is it only about the source of power or in the way that the textiles are manufactured? Or is there something else also that's influencing this gender dynamic?
It's an overall dynamic. So availability of skills, the process, the way energy is being supplied, the way things are manufactured, the design process itself. So, all of these factors are at play, but it all adds up, and there are interventions that could be replicated across many other that.
Sure.
If you just look at the skills, the model, the enabling environment, and the overall support that can come in from the policy side.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when you were talking about new job profiles being opened up in electrical and electronic engineers, one of the things we heard from an OEM was saying that, please send me CVs. Is that a majority of the applicants are men? And so it looks like maybe there is a need to kind of also advertise and create awareness around emerging opportunities in the sector as well to take advantage of these. Fantastic. And so now coming to you, Divya, learning from your kind of the pilot that you are implementing, I think in Bangalore and in Delhi, what are the learnings that you're seeing currently, and what might be some recommendations for from a policy perspective? Dolon very clearly spoke about the need for a multi-sectoral approach to financing. What about what your experiences are showing?
So thanks, Sonal. And Vivek has also again looked at some of the very interesting points. Really love some of the insights. Coming back to the pilot that I'm talking about, so we are targeting 3,000 youth, with 60% of them being women in both Bangalore and Delhi, where we are basically tying up with EV partners like Okinawa or Yamaha, TVS, etc., whosoever is in the EV manufacturing industry, where in the premise of these industries, we are mobilizing women to get hard skills training of the whole automobile supply chain, and also introduce 50 hours module on the EV sector itself. Then we link these women to apprenticeship model, where they also get a stipend for 10 to 12,000 rupees a month for a period of 5 to 6 months, so that they also have something as an apprentice coming to their, as a small amount which is coming to them. And that's just a small safety net, of course. But what's happening, the larger thing that's happening is with this model, that because EV sector is such a new thing that's happening, and we're still figuring out, all of us together, we're still waiting and watching on different other guidelines. It's so exciting to see women's reaction on not only getting involved as sales executive or as front desk managers, but also being involved in the assembly line, doing the battery assembly part, looking at the warehouse, etc. So it's not stopping women only to be at the service or a call center sort of a stage only, but actually making them also be equal in terms of getting involved at different job roles. Having said that, I would say that we are constantly now talking to both Karnataka government and Delhi government to identify more such job roles. So far we have identified 4. We want to identify at least 3 to 4 more such job roles within this year, so that we can encourage more women to join. One of the challenge that remains is that most of these centers are in the outskirts of Delhi, like in Greater Noida, etc. So there's a lot of safety and mobility issue there also. And for that, we obviously need to sensitize the private sector partners, manufacturing units, dealers, that it's why is it important to involve women, and what kind of safety, etc., measures we need to take. And not only at that front, but also with women, we are running separate modules where we talk about workspace safety, right? So it's everything sort of happening together, right? Hard skills training, soft skills training, also helping women become more confident, giving them that space that this is also a sector for them. Even just breaking that barrier amongst girls and parents. I mean, one point which we missed discussing about is So we have started this experiment where we are also interacting with parents of the candidates, and that's really helping and allowing them to sit in the class for first for 30 minutes or last 30 minutes for them to actually see that what their daughters are going through, what kind of training they are experiencing. So these kind of processes change is really also helping, because it has to be a sensitized and very sensitive way of approaching the whole gamut of initiatives.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up a little bit on, because we've certainly identified the need for not only technical but also life skills, social training, psychosocial support as well. Role of the district skill committees and the ITIs. What can be their roles? Because you had touched upon it, and I would just like to kind of circle back and come on this, because many ITIs tend to have very traditional courses, right, for women. So any thoughts on that?
See, I think that's one thing where we need a lot more efforts. I wouldn't claim that we have had success there. Of course, we work very closely with ITIs, where we have now designed our own modules and curriculum around 21st century skills, and very kindly, most government partners and ITIs have agreed for us to take those 1 hours out of students 1 year, where on a daily basis we are teaching in at least one classroom on a daily basis, where we are giving these 21st century skills training. Along with that, we are also strengthening the placement cells. We are also getting employers sensitized and bringing them to these institutions, including MSMEs. Because see, at the end, ITIs and MSMEs are the most hyper-local institutes. They are the most accessible to youth if you really want to see change at large scale. If you don't do partnership with them, if you don't work together, we are not going to ever achieve the scale which we are envisaging, and it will become like a pilot model here and there, and we really need to mainstream these initiatives. So I think that is something which has been definitely a learning, that while there are certain traditional trades that are going on, how can slowly we start bringing some sort of standardized modules and curriculum across these traditional trades. And I think at the state government, so UNDP has recently done a partnership with MSDE, where now we are talking about setting up working with district skills committee, subgroups and groups, where on a yearly basis a planning is going to be made about what all sectors as government we need to focus on. There are 20 members at least at each district level. Everyone's role is clearly defined. It's just that these things have not been activated for like a few years now or decades. So that these are the things. There's already a lot of system which is already there, and that's the point I'm trying to make. We really need to invest a lot on just improving our processes. There's a lot out there already.
Yeah, there is a lot, and I think it looks like the connections need to be made between the company, between the skilling institute, between and increasing awareness and linking these, so that even skilling and apprenticeship models then get translated into jobs perhaps as well. Fantastic. And so now coming to you, Saurabh, you shared multiple examples with us. Looking at gender, electric mobility, health, multiple examples. Because, I'm going to pick up from what Divya just mentioned. How do we scale these up, right? What is the scale up mechanism, and what is the recommendation, if at all, for e-mobility policies?
Right. If you really ask me, I think the one possibly the most critical and to achieve right now, everything we've said about the drawing board, and Divya actually brought out some amazing points in terms of some of the nuances on working with this. I think it's important to map out where the key decisions are being made, right? And the key decisions towards the end of this entire cycle. So there is a policy cycle, there is a training cycle, mobilization training cycle, then there's a the end employment or the end entrepreneurship facilitation cycle, right? I think Srinivas also mentioned that. He was right. There is a romantic notion around entrepreneurship and everything is going to work out. It doesn't work like that. in our experience rather, I think the one place where the most amazing things can happen is to map out the decisions and where they are made. The decisions in the sense that, where do recruitment decisions happen? Recruitment managers take recruitment decisions, right? Where does procurement happen? Where are supply chain decisions happening? They will not happen with CSR. They will happen with procurement managers, right? Where are the business heads settled? And the question is, are the business heads, the procurement leads, the recruitment managers, is this entire cohort, what can we do to get this entire cohort onboarded and buying into and having an organic understanding of what kind of difference their decisions can actually make. So we do 10-day, 15-day immersion programs where you just take cohorts, business manager cohorts, into communities and eventually tell them that, listen, management principles are fairly simple. If you want to commit to, let's say, a gender representation or a gender positive or whatever phrase we might want to use, it's not rocket science. First commit, and then you make the systems work. Because here's a woman who may not have enough rights, enough representation, who's fighting against multiple odds, and here is a decision maker who is educated, who has the skills to construct a business model which is representative. Seriously, the onus of thinking cannot shift from the business manager to the person who's going through that, right? So I think that sensitization is a little, ये बहुत sensitization होता है. It has to be an immersive process where there's a mindset change there. And we have seen within the group, within the CIF fraternity, wherever we've seen this, where that mindset change happens, the magic really happens there. So for us, I'll give you an example. Our mining operations, okay, conventional male-dominated mining operations. Okay, so all the heads of our mining businesses right now have gone through at least 15 days of deep community immersions, not in areas or communities of their comfort or choice, but in across parts of the country, and have an understanding. So it took us about a year and a half just to say that, the question that came up in their own mind, saying that, why would women not work 3 shifts? If there's a security issue, if there's a safety issue, surely the safety issue is the same for a man and a woman. Right, so that question actually came out of this space, and now about 8 months ago or about a year ago, we've actually introduced women in all shifts in mind. So that is not just taking the existing canvas and making it more representative. That's actually increasing the size of the canvas. So to me, the one thing that can really move the needle is this sensitization. Otherwise, like-minded people like us will keep talking about it. We'll do some great stuff. Let's grapple with the people who are the non-believers, or who, it's just that, and in my my experience, it's just that no one's had the conversation yet. It's not as if people are unwilling. It's not a bunch of unwilling people who are waiting out there. Sometimes the conversation hasn't happened in a language that makes sense both ways, and I think the day we crack that, I think there's some significant shift waiting to happen. So since you asked, Sonal.
Sure, absolutely. Thinking about different ways of how we think about sensitization, right? As well. I'm also at this point seeing a question, and I think perhaps Vivek, it is to you in response to the initiative that you spoke about in terms of the ITI vocational courses in solar and energy efficiency. I think there's a question by Anita in terms of understanding any data on employment or income.
Thank you, and I think we are still pulling together that data. The experiment that we've been doing has been fairly recent, just about the past year, where Sonal, to your point, we've connected the manufacturer, the employer, the skilling institution, and the workforce with these clean tech adoption pilots. So we have this positive feedback loop that's being built up, because when you talk about MSMEs, one of the biggest barriers for them to adopt, either a solar or a clean tech solution is lack of skills, lack of awareness, and lack of capabilities, because the promoter itself is the chief sustainability officer, chief compliance officer, all built into one. So what we've done is we've added skills, localized skills on ground available right next door. But we've not done that with the conventional workforce. We've brought in, folks who are mostly from the vocational side, the ITIs, the youth, who are looking at employment and stuff. So we've done these. We've trained more than 200 people through these connecting mechanisms, through the pilots, where we've also got then brands to start up with an industry apprenticeship program, bringing in 3 months of very intensive, program that ensures that the student or the youth, a woman engineer, is able to deploy those skills in a factory or become an entrepreneur, make a lantern, or deploy certain solutions on ground, and then come back with what are the kind of impacts and results that we are seeing. So all of this has been in motion, but unfortunately our data is still being compiled yet. So maybe next month we should be able to share more details on this.
Sure, absolutely. As we're talking about learning from other sectors, Dolon would love to come to you at this point. Azad works on multiple non-traditional livelihoods, in construction and others. Any other learnings from these that you think that provide something for women in the e-mobility sector?
Honestly, Azad directly doesn't work in the construction yet, but we are part of the NTL network, and our network partners work on the different NTL. And in terms of what is your exact question is, Sonal? So
yeah, what we're trying to understand is how can other sectors, are there any examples or learnings from other sectors that can influence or that provide some learnings for the e-mobility sector? So maybe your experience with NTL, is there anything that the e-mobility industry can adopt, perhaps? Any learnings on that?
Yeah, of course. As I said, that it's good that e-mobility sector is opening for women and thinking of including women, but there needs to be very clear-cut policies of each state. There needs to be very clear-cut implementation plan with timeline. And if you talk about from taking learning from other sector, I think we have, all the player of the non-traditional livelihood, bringing women in non-traditional livelihood, would say that there needs to be a separate kind of effort, separate set of skill development effort, and putting the women in the market if we really want to bring women in this industry. When you set a separate, I would, as Divya said, of course, that there are a lot of discrimination in the traditional work area too, traditional professions too, but non-traditional to have a historical discrimination experience, because historically women have said that this is not your area. So bringing that myth and bringing women here need a separate out-of-box thinking, implementation, solid implementation plan with clear-cut. I would say that ground reality we'll have to keep in the mind. And as everyone said in this panel, that the women's identity realities we have to keep in mind. And when we say that from the learning from the other sector also, we need to provide we need to create a holistic support network, ecosystem building network to bring women in this sector. So when you say the holistic support network or ecosystem building, what does it exactly mean? It means women need to first go out. So women's mobility first needs to be ensured, and that should be the safe and secured. Number two, there should be proper adequate training and the mindset training, technical training, at the same time the mindset training, mindset of the particular women, the trainees, as well as the society. So there are two kinds of investment here. The society also need to prepare themselves to get women bus driver or e-bus driver or something like that. So or employ women as e-cab driver or employ women as e-delivery executive. So this is one. Third thing I would say, which we have already discussed, that the accessing to resources for these women. While you bring women from certain background who are already traditionally, historically out of resources, they don't have access or control over resources, you have to provide certain kind of resource support to them. So these three, I would say, we need to replicate from other sectors if we really bring women to this e-mobility or e-transport sector. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Torun. And now coming to you, Snigdha, I think we've had multiple participants talk about different approaches, either be hyper-local approaches around training and creating linkages with SMEs, talking about programs that actually bridge this gap, like, for example, apprenticeship models, talking about access to resources. Any learnings for you, Snigdha, in terms of, what might be some things that either CESL or other government agencies can pick up from here?
Sonal, hi, sorry. No, it's been a very, very healthy interaction, and I've learned quite a lot. And Vivek, thank you so much for bringing up such a variety of models that are working in terms of training, in terms of the Solar Mama program you brought up, and there are definitely a lot of learnings from the coal mining aspect and from the sources of energy aspect that we talked about. And yes, of course, what Dolan shared in terms of the inherent challenges of the role of women in ownership, in decision making, and lastly, also the point that Srinivas shared about access to finance and how that's a constraint for women. And we're also learning. In fact, after today's panel, I guess we'll think a little bit more clearly and more strategically about how to create these financing vehicles targeting women. So, for example, we have been looking at some solar pump models that are community-based, and that has a very similar challenge of lack of collateral and lack of ability of the farmers to pay for the various instruments. So we are exploring a community-based model, and maybe that's something we can explore. Just from the discussions that has come up. So maybe that's something we can look at. And yes, of course, on the technical side, on the skilling work, and Vivek, I've actually worked with the effort, so it was really nice for you to have shared that. And we are definitely working, as I mentioned, we're working with Azad, and we're trying to learn more from those on the ground. And this is sort of something that I'm personally passionate about, where we typically see that a lot of ideas come from the West, from multilaterals, implemented by governments, and then on the ground it's taken up by supposed to be taken up by civil societies and NGOs, sort of like a top-down approach. And I'm like very passionate about reversing that model, where I feel like the ideas should come from the ground, and we sitting here should implement those ideas. So I don't know how successful I will be in that, but so thank you for this. I've definitely learned a lot, and I can assure you some of these points, especially on the access to finance aspect and how we can innovate around that, I'll make sure that we at least push the needle a little bit on this one.
And there is a lot to think about, because I'm also processing so many good points that we've had over the last 2 hours. So perhaps maybe just sitting back and contemplating is also going to be, take some time. So what I'll do is, to all participants, and starting with Divya, because I think she mentioned she has to leave, one last sentence as a key takeaway and as an action statement, one last sentence on gender just transition to cleaner mobility.
I think one line is we keep doing our innovations. It's very, very important to do good quality scientific skills training. But at the same time, we do not leave on the leadership and the transferable skills part, and they both have to really marry together. And we have to invest in our women for the next 20 years. We cannot let this little wave, which has now started across the country, it has to kind of go ahead more. Yeah.
Fantastic. Invest and also think about leadership and not only employment. Vivek, over to you. I have a feeling he's probably dropped out. Saurav, I have a feeling.
Sonal, no famous last words or catchphrase. Just get the right people at the drawing board, and I think we just have to plow away. And I just think that many people who can and should be thinking about this today are not thinking about this today. Okay, and I think that's where the magic will lie. To get them to start thinking about the agenda right now. So,
okay.
Thank you.
It's a tough one. All right. Snigdha, any last comments? One sentence only.
I can't think of any particular last words, but yeah, just definitely hope that through this whole e-mobility and this setting of a new agenda, we can think of we can think of redefining the system. So that's the hope. But let's see.
Okay. Yeah. So don't include redefine. That's a pretty powerful statement. Dolon.
Yeah, actually, the last line would be, I think I am very hopeful that we can do it together. We can change these dynamics of not including women in any new venture. So I think we can do it together, but we should have the very clear coordination between all the stakeholders. And we have to very clearly keep in mind about the issue of access, as we all said. I don't want to repeat, but just to finish, because that's a point we are really facing challenge on, that access to infrastructure, charging station, etc., access to resources, and together, I think if we keep bringing and reaching to the women who need it. So if we just can create this all-inclusive package and close coordination between us, all these stakeholders, all the sectors, then I am sure that we will, maybe after 5 years, when we have this kind of panel, we'll see that a lot of women in e-transportation. I think we will do that. We'll be able to.
Super. Access, and coordinate. And I'm also seeing two really good quotes. One from Anita: we shall overcome and transform the situation. And I think Srinivas is saying, baat niklegi to dur talak jayegi. I will probably try and, I'm imagining what Vivek would have said, coming back to the first sentence, that he made when he started. He says, we can only solve climate change if we involve women. And I'm going to add gender and sexual minorities and other intersectionalities. With this, I think we will close the discussion today. Thanks to everybody, all our participants, both here in the room, I'm hoping on Facebook as well. It has been a wonderful experience, lots of learning, lots of processing, and look forward to learning from each other as we move forward, advocating, doing research, working on the ground on creating a gender equitable future society, so sustainable and equitable society. Thank you so much. A very big thanks to Azad Foundation for organizing this panel and this session. A big thank you to the panelists and the participants.
Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you.